On this warm Sunday evening in August, Frances Thompson is home alone when she hears a car pull up outside. She isn't expecting any company. But when longtime friend Dean Frank shows up out of the blue, Frances fears for her life.
They've been friends for years, but lately the relationship has taken a turn. Dean's behavior has become increasingly threatening.
Things escalate quickly, and the altercation turns deadly.
It's an hour that you have to be at your best behavior as a police officer. You've got to be alert, you have to investigate, and you have to play self-defense at the same time.
As investigators struggle to piece together what happened that led to this shooting,
it's a tragedy that will both shock and puzzle the community. And only by understanding the events in this key hour of the murder does the truth really come to light. One of the most shocking statistics is that over 50% of murders are committed by people who know the victim. And of those, half are in a familial or intimate relationship. It's enough to make you wonder, who do you know that is capable of such a horrendous act? When it comes to Frances Thompson, a widow with a bent toward activism and animal rights, killer seems like a moniker that shouldn't stick. But as authorities step through a key hour in this case, the murder of her friend and companion, Dean Frank, and the circumstances surrounding their relationship brings the crime into focus. The Thompsons' farm is located 20 miles northwest of the small village of Verdigre, Nebraska, in Knox County. It's a remote area, surrounded on all sides by farmland. Verdigre is a 2-hour drive from the capital, Lincoln, Nebraska. It's an isolated village of only 555 people. It boasts a high Czech population, and as the Koláš capital of the world, embraces its Czech origins by hosting a festival every June to celebrate the fruity Koláš pastry.
Knox County is in northeast Nebraska. The northern border is the Missouri River, which up here is a little over a mile wide, mostly an agricultural area. We have a lot of tourism because of the river and the state parks.
Dean Frank and Frances Thompson have been friends for over 5 years. Over the past few months, the two have toyed with the idea of taking that friendship to the next level. But recently, Frances has cold feet and begins to fear Dean is pursuing her too aggressively. In 1985, Frances Thompson moves in with her mother and son into a farmhouse 20 miles northwest of Verdigre after her husband dies in a construction accident. It's a chance for Frances and her teenage son to start over.
Frances meets Dean Frank, a man a few years older than her who used to be a farmer and is living in Atkinson, a few hours away.
Like a lot of farmers, when the farm crisis hit, he had difficulties.
Frances' mother pays Dean to come by and do odd jobs around the farm. And on the occasions where he works into the evening, he stays overnight in a spare bedroom upstairs. He and Frances develop a close friendship.
But clearly something happens between them that leads to this violent altercation, resulting in Francis shooting Dean.
Dean Frank lies wounded on Francis Thompson's kitchen floor. As he bleeds out, Francis calls 911. She tells the operator that she shot Dean in self-defense, claiming that he threatened her.
He came in, he lunged at her and said, "I'm going to kill you," or something to that effect, and she shot him.
Time is of the essence as officers make their way to the farmhouse, hoping to arrive in time to save Dean's life.
Not long after Francis moves onto the farm, she buys a pig and names him Arthur.
She was, I guess you would say, an animal rights activist in a small way.
She was active in some of the political things. She was against a proposed chicken farm by Bloomfield.
If she could rescue every animal destined for slaughter, she would, which leads to her dream of converting the property into an organic farm.
In the summer of 1988, Francis goes away to attend the university in Lincoln, Nebraska, studying environmental law. Dean's main task becomes the care and well-being of looking after Francis' pet pig Arthur while she's gone.
By 1991, Francis has been studying environmental law at Lincoln for 3 years. She's a straight-A student, passionate about animal rights and environmental protection. She may be older than a lot of students in her classes, but this is the life transformation Francis was searching for after the death of her husband.
Francis' son is now grown and away from the farm, attending Naval Academy.
In the summer of '91, after classes finish and Francis returns from the university in Lincoln, her friendship with Dean blossoms into romance.
The last man Francis is with is her husband, and she's been closed off to the idea of romance since his passing. But now that her son is grown, she's put down roots, and is close to a new career in environmental law, she thinks it may be time to entertain the idea of opening up her heart.
Over that summer, Dean and Francis spend more and more time together as their feelings for each other build.
Francis wants to take things slowly, however. She hasn't been with another man since her husband, and has some reservations about getting into a sexual relationship.
Dean doesn't have the same reservations. In fact, over that summer he proposes several times. The first proposal isn't overly romantic. In fact, he positions it as a business opportunity.
Unsurprisingly, Francis doesn't go for Dean's proposal.
An avid letter writer, she writes to her son at the Naval Academy, expressing her fears that Dean is just using her to get to her farm. She signs off saying, "Remember, I may whine and cry, but I is a tough old lady and a damn good shot too."
But Dean is persistent and won't take no for an answer. He continues to try persuading Francis that she should marry him.
As the tenor of Dean's activities become more threatening, she contacts the local sheriff and advises him that she is getting phone calls from him that are threatening. He advises her to maintain a log and to keep track of the things that he's saying to her. On August the 18th, 1991, she contacts the sheriff again about obtaining a restraining order. He advises her that she has to wait till the following day because it is a Sunday and she can only file for the order on a Monday.
Not long after calling the sheriff, Francis hears Dean's car outside. He's come unannounced.
Francis keeps 2 guns in the house. One is a .357 Magnum, a very powerful handgun, and she keeps it very close to her.
Francis Thompson's farm is located 20 miles northwest of the small village of Verdigre, Nebraska, in Knox County. Moving to the farm is the chance for Francis and her son to start over after the death of her husband. Though Francis isn't a farmer, she befriends Dean Frank, a local man who's been affected by the farming crisis of the 80s.
Over Over the next few years, the friendship between Dean and Frances deepens, and in the summer of 1991, they begin a romantic courtship.
But on August 18th, after weeks of Dean trying to convince Frances to marry him, he becomes aggressive and threatens her.
Frances warns Dean. When he doesn't back down, she opens fire.
It's been nearly 15 minutes since Frances shoots Dean in self-defense. The nearest squad car is almost an hour away. All Frances can do is wait for help to arrive.
Investigators will later learn that Frances is trained in first aid by the Red Cross, but she has yet to offer any assistance to Dean, who is incapacitated and bleeding to death on her floor.
It appears after being shot he's no longer a threat. She has the training to help stop the bleeding. However, for some reason, she does not try to.
If she's afraid for her safety, it's understandable she'd be hesitant to help. But is Dean really a dangerous threat?
Since moving to the farm in 1985, Frances and Dean have slowly built a friendship.
She said for 6 years he was a perfect gentleman. They had a non-sexual friendship, and occasional odd job employer relationship.
But Dean wants more than just friendship.
Frances is hesitant because she hasn't had a sexual relationship with anyone since her husband's passing.
The following week, Frances writes to Dean saying that she has some concerns. Dean has had other partners in the past, and before she feels safe entering into a sexual relationship with him, she'd like them both to be tested for STIs and AIDS.
On July 3rd, 1991, Dean and Frances jointly visit a physician in Verdigre to get tested.
She also would write letters saying that she was very much of two minds about whether or not to resume a sexual relationship with a man.
On July 12th, Frances visits Dean at his trailer to deliver the results. The test came back negative. They spend the next 3 nights in his trailer.
After Frances returns home, she writes Dean a letter.
She says in her letter, "I put way too much energy into antagonizing about letting sex back into my life. Guess it ain't for you, but for me, it was the biggest change in lifestyle imaginable." Presumably, Dean isn't taking the new direction of their relationship as seriously as Frances.
About a week later, on January 22nd, Frances calls Dean and tells him that for their relationship to work, she needs to meet his ex-wife and children.
Dean apparently finds this to be a strange request and gets upset. This is a red flag to Frances.
Over the next week, there are several calls exceeding 30 minutes between the two, as well as letter correspondence.
As the summer progressed, she also started to double-check. She contacted Dean's ex-girlfriend in O'Neill, wanted to know about Dean as a boyfriend. She contacted the ex-wife who would have had Dean's 4 children, and contacted her several times, at least twice, about Dean as a boyfriend.
While Dean appears eager to make up for Frances and take their relationship to the next level, her letters to her son and friends suggest that she doesn't trust him and thinks he's hiding details of his past relationships in order to make her jealous.
She said that he grew interested in having a sexual relationship with her and talked about marriage, that he would quit his job and work on the farm with her, and that they could do organic farming, which was coming into vogue back in that period of time.
Frances is suspicious that Dean has ulterior motives, that if he really cared about her and not just her farm, he'd open up about his past instead of feeding her jealousy.
Over the next few days, Frances sees a change in Dean. He's exhibiting strange behavior, and she's worried about her safety and brushes up on her firearm skills.
She had actually purchased ammunition from the local hardware store 3 times. She had taken training to become a private investigator and a security guard.
The investigation showed that she had a couple guns, but 2 guns were seized during the investigation, a .357 Magnum and I believe a .25 Auto, Beretta .25 Auto. If I remember right, the investigation actually showed that at times Fran would keep those guns in a safety deposit box at the local bank. And prior to the homicide, the .357 Magnum and the .25 Auto were apparently taken out of the safety deposit box, were taken to the farmstead, to the house. She practiced with both handguns. There was evidence to indicate that.
It's been over 20 minutes since Francis shot Dean. He's lost a lot of blood, and by now the pain would be excruciating. He's still conscious.
I'm holding in my hands a .357 Magnum shell. This is a .22 caliber shell. In the police world, this is considered a people stopper. This is considered a very light caliber bullet, incapable of doing much damage unless it hits you in a vital organ. This travels out of the barrel at 1,450 feet per second. This one around 1,000. So the comparison for civilian terms would be being hit with a tennis ball in the forehead at 100 miles an hour. You're going to survive. Getting hit with this is like getting hit with a baseball at 100 miles an hour. You are not going to recover.
As officers race to the crime scene, they're aware of how much time has passed. They don't know yet the severity of Dean's wounds, but they do know that they still have many miles to go before they reach him. And the question of whether or not he'll still be alive by the time they get there is anyone's guess. Over the summer of 1991, the years-long friendship between Dean Frank and Frances Thompson takes a romantic turn.
Dean proposes to Frances several times, but she wants to take things slow.
After Dean refuses to introduce Frances to his ex and his children, she grows suspicious and pulls away.
According to Frances, this enrages Dean and he begins making threats.
Fearing for her safety, Frances buys ammo for her 2 handguns and spends some time target practicing. And on August 18th, things escalate when Dean comes over unannounced and utters threats.
According to Frances, she warns Dean to back off. When he doesn't, she shoots him.
It's been minutes since Dean was shot. He moans in pain, unable to move. Feeling sympathy for him, Frances places a cushion under his head to make him more comfortable.
Given his injuries, it's unlikely that he poses any threat to Frances. Why she doesn't help him, she's under stress, shock. It's unknown why she doesn't try to help him. It's an extremely traumatic situation.
What happened between these two that led to this violent encounter?
Not long ago, they were considering marriage, and now Dean lies dying on her floor.
Over the past week, the calls from Dean became increasingly threatening.
She adds that on August the 5th, she had spoken to Doris Fisher, Dean's ex-girlfriend, who advised her that at one point in their relationship, he had been drunk, threatened her, and was apparently telling her he was going to slit her throat. This made her think that it was time to end the relationship with Dean and to protect herself.
A few days after this phone call, she finds Dean on the property, fixing Arthur the pig's irrigation pipe. It's at this time that she allegedly tells him never to come back to her farm. In the present hour, the situation is dire. It's hard to understand why things have unfolded the way they have. But now Dean is lying on the floor, bleeding out quickly.
Everybody's different, and everybody has a different tolerance for trauma. If someone's bleeding out in close proximity, a witness might jump in to help, they might run for help, they might sit there and panic. You don't know until you're in the situation.
But then something unexpected allegedly occurs. Dean uses his energy to communicate with authorities, even if he cannot speak for himself.
If someone's been shot, particularly with a higher caliber bullet, it's not like in the movies. People feel pain. They become incapacitated. You'd have to be quite a powerful person that was already in fight or flight mode to be able to move after being shot, especially in the abdomen 3 times.
Meanwhile, authorities continue traveling toward the shooting, aware of the time and distance to get there.
It can be stressful. It's an unknown. Like, you have no idea what you're getting into in most 911 calls, except in an urban setting, you know there's support nearby. When you're on your own going out into a rural area, you have to have your wits about you. And usually in a rural setting, there's darkness, there's lack of lighting, there's unknown surroundings. You're not familiar with the area because you don't patrol it all the time. Whereas in an urban setting, I'm going to 55 First Street. I know that area. I've been there all my life. I go to a rural setting 40 miles away. I may never have been to this place. I don't know who's there. I don't know what's there. For the police officer, the next thing is backup. Do I have people coming to help? Because you're traveling far away from your headquarters or your office. Plus, you don't know the services you need when you get there. Do you need forensic backup? Do you need medical backup? Do you need fire? You don't know what you're getting into, and you're always the first one on the scene.
It has been almost 30 minutes since Francis shot Dean. He is still alive, but losing blood quickly.
This is a real traumatic hour for Dean and Francis. He's been shot. The clock is ticking within this hour. She doesn't know if he's going to live or die before the police get there, which requires her to make another decision within that hour. Dean may die from the initial shots, but she can't take that chance. He may talk to the police when they arrive. So she now has to make a very difficult decision.
This decision would ultimately be the key to solving what happened before the police arrived.
Like many calls, the officers responding don't have a lot of information. They would have had a call to an active shooting. She claims to 911 or whoever she contacted that it was self-defense. So they arrive and they have to worry, is she hurt? What's the condition of the person that's involved in the shooting? What is the circumstances going to be when they get there? So they have to enter with caution, look to treat someone that may be injured, see where that gun is. You want to secure that gun immediately because you don't want anybody else getting shot. It's an hour that you have to be at your best behavior as a police officer. You've got to be alert, you have to investigate, and you have to play self-defense at the same time. It's a very intense hour during that killing.
When officers finally arrive, they find Dean unresponsive, though he still has a discernible pulse. Because it's a shooting, paramedics can't do anything until officers clear the scene.
Paramedics arrive and attempt CPR, but all attempts at resuscitation on Dean are futile. He's deemed dead at 7 p.m.
Standard procedure in these things is to ask the shooter to come in for questioning. And she's very quick to point out that there's a message written in blood beside Dean, who's laying on the floor.
So when the deputies get to this house, there's written in blood on the floor next to Dean where he's laying, self-defense, and his blood printed on the floor.
This will become one of the more puzzling aspects of this case.
Sheriff Eisenbeiss interviews Frances to try and understand her history with Dean, and what led to the use of deadly force. Frances is cooperative in explaining that over the past week, the calls from Dean became increasingly threatening.
She buys ammunition for her gun and practices shooting targets to brush up on her skills.
For these police officers, the weapons training, the log of the abusive calls, the fact she had filed for the restraining order, gives them total justification that this possibly could be self-defense, combined with this message in blood on the floor. However, once they start looking at the timeline and the details within that very important hour, there's holes in this case.
For instance, when asked if Dean breaks into her house, Frances says no. The front door is unlocked and he comes in with a bag of groceries, which he puts away in the fridge.
She also claims that she heard Dean's car approaching. She gets up, arms herself. He enters the house and the shooting occurs. It begs the question, if she heard the car coming, why didn't she lock the door and take evasive measures?
When I entered the house, I seen no signs of a forced entry. I didn't see any signs of a struggle inside, which I thought was kind of strange. Everything appeared to be like it should be. There wasn't any sign of people rolling around fighting. There wasn't any sign of a door kicked in.
The sheriff questions Frances about the message written in blood.
Frances claims that Dean wrote this message in blood in his own hand to prove her innocence in the case, indicating that he still loved her evidently and didn't want her to get in trouble. And this begs a question, why would he do that to the police? It's a big red flag.
As investigators search the house, the message in blood isn't the only handwritten note they find, supposedly absolving Frances of any wrongdoing.
They find a note written in pencil with the words, "I love Fran, self-defense, and I love you."
There was some writing in blood. All I could make out at the time was the word self was wrote in blood on the floor, and there was some hand scribbled type messages on paper, something to the effect of self-defense, or it was very poorly spelled, hard to read.
This is all very strange, and one can't help but wonder, did Frances write this herself? She could be concerned that her story about Dean's threatening calls and supposed aggressive movement towards her are not enough to convince a jury, so she writes these messages.
If the shooting is justified, she still has a lot of time to sit with her thoughts while she waits for help to arrive.
Up until recently, she and Dean have been close. It's not hard to imagine that she probably starts regretting her actions. After all, she can hear Dean dying just a few feet away.
The crime scene evidence would suggest that Dean never wrote the message in blood.
There was no blood on his left hand or left fingers at all.
This becomes very important later on, as these are written with a right hand lean and he is left-handed.
Whether or not Frances wrote the message in blood isn't the only detail troubling investigators. There are other elements of the case that aren't adding up.
For whatever reason, in her statement to the sheriff, Frances claims that Dean was crawling around on the floor. But evidence at the scene clearly shows that the blood is contained to the one area where Dean was shot and went down.
Dean's been shot 3 times with a .357 Magnum. He's extremely injured, so why does Fran tell the police a different version of the events?
As puzzling as the inconsistencies, or perhaps the outright fabrications, in Frances's testimony are, they're nothing compared to what the autopsy is about to reveal.
Frances tells the sheriff that when Dean refused to heed her warnings, she shot him 3 times in rapid succession in the abdomen. The medical examiner confirms that Dean is shot 3 times, but only once from the front. The other 2 shots were inflicted from behind.
Officers arrive at Frances Thompson's home and find Dean Frank still alive and bleeding out in her kitchen. Frances claims she acted in self-defense. However, officers notice strange notes, allegedly written by Dean. With no other witnesses to the shooting, officers accept her story at first, but autopsy evidence is about to undo her credibility. As detectives look at the autopsy results, they see that the report tells a very different story than the one Frances has been telling.
The shot to the lower left abdomen from the front occurred 30 or 40 minutes before death, that there were changes around the wound that indicated that the person was alive and the body was dealing with this wound. veins would show up with discoloration. And then he also testified and had told us after the autopsy that the one gunshot from the back that went through the liver and the lung and exited the body, that the damage it did to the liver would have been such that he would have died within 5 to 10, 15 minutes at the most after getting that gunshot wound.
In light of the evidence, the police know that she did not fire 3 shots directly at him at the time of the shooting.
Looking at the forensic evidence, we construct a timeline of what actually happened. Frances shoots Dean once at 5:35 p.m., then calls 911 to report that she shot him in self-defense.
Question is, what happens between the first shot and the time that officers arrive almost an hour later?
When detectives arrive at the scene, they know that Dean is shot 3 times. By going through the autopsy with the pathologist, they're able to determine that he probably died from the shot to the liver. However, that shot was delivered sometime after the initial 2 shots. This now requires law enforcement officers to go back and recreate a timeline from the time of the 911 call, the shooting was reported, when did this 3rd shot take place?
Officers now have to operate under the assumption that Frances has been lying to them, and that her version of events can't be trusted.
What likely happens is that when Dean arrives with the groceries, since the door was unlocked and Frances was armed, she was probably expecting him. It wasn't a surprise visit like she claimed because she was ready for a confrontation. He's putting groceries in the fridge when she calls to him. Once he turns around, she shoots him once. Dean goes down, totally incapacitated by the gunshot, and Frances calls 911, claiming she shot him in self-defense.
Dean lies face down, unable to move, though still breathing. Frances points the gun and shoots him 2 times, point blank in the back. By some stroke of misfortune for her, Dean survives, and before she can do anything about it, officers arrive on the scene.
The original plan may have worked if Dean had died. 1 shot could look like self-defense. But when Frances has to shoot him again, the plan isn't going the way she anticipated. This is probably why she writes the words self-defense in blood and claims that Dean wrote it.
As you can imagine, there's a lot of excitement. And I don't mean excitement in a we're happy type excitement. It's just there's a lot of going on. You're going from almost like 20 miles an hour to 150 miles an hour like that. So the scene is secure, everything is going on. It's obvious Dean Frank has been shot. It's obvious he's getting treatment. When I entered the house, I seen no signs of a forced entry. I didn't see any signs of a struggle inside, which I thought was kind of strange. Everything appeared to be like it should be. There wasn't any sign of people rolling around fighting. There wasn't any sign of a door kicked in. Nothing that would indicate somebody came in and attacked somebody.
The .357 Magnum is a hand cannon. It's a very loud gun, louder than most. She knows if the police pull in the driveway, she cannot put the finishing shot into him. It has to be done before the police get close to the residence.
She had called in and said that she had shot him, and he's not dying. You've got notes written in blood, you've got notes written on paper, and he's not dying. And it's reasonable to believe she heard sirens from the rescue squad, and he's not dying. It's reasonable to believe when the deputies were en route, by policy, they'd have been running red lights and siren, and he's not dying. We also had a couple boys playing golf who'd heard some shots, and the shots were very, very spaced out. And now she's got a story, and she's got self-defense, and she's got everything lined up. And so there is a shot that's fired that had to be the last shot. He's got 3 holes in him, three rounds that went through him. 3 rounds are in the floor. He's not dying. We know If he was shot in front of an emergency room door and wheeled in the emergency room, the pathologist, the expert would have testified he's not going to live more than 5 to 7 minutes. And he's alive when the deputies go in and when rescue squad, the EMS goes in, but he's dying. And he dies before he reaches Verdigris, Nebraska. He's pronounced dead. So it's not like TV. You don't just shoot somebody and they die.
Francis shoots Dean 3 times, hoping that by the time help arrives, he'll be gone. But he manages somehow to cling to life.
The fact that officers find Dean still alive when they arrive is the nail in the coffin for Francis's defense. From the pathologist's report, we know that he would have survived only minutes after being struck in the liver. This tells police that Francis's self-defense claim is fabricated. It's a cover.
While investigators may not have a motive for why Francis killed Dean, they know at least one thing. It's no accident. They charge her with first-degree murder. The community is shocked to find out that animal-loving environmentalist Francis Thompson is being charged with first-degree murder.
Her defense team is hoping that they can use her history and standing in the community to make her seem sympathetic. On the other hand, they set out to make Dean seem like a man with a history of threatening behavior. They enter into evidence the letters that Francis wrote describing her fear of Dean and his increasingly threatening phone calls.
Her lawyers attempt to dissuade the jury of any notion that Francis is jealous and wants to keep Dean. In a letter where Francis alludes to being jealous and in love with Dean, the defense claims that Francis only means she loves him as a friend, and that when she says jealous, what she really means is disgusted.
They paint a picture that Dean is the one obsessed with Fran. She has no romantic interest in him whatsoever. He's pursuing her, threatening to cause harm, which gives her the justification for the self-defense motive that she has come up with. However, the facts paint a completely different picture.
Whatever claims the defense makes, they're contradicted by the actual evidence in this case. Even the threatening phone calls are only alleged. Francis has no audio recordings or other proof that Dean actually made these phone calls. Francis has painted herself as the victim, but the truth is she shot her friend, and while he was dying mere feet from her, she shot him 2 more times.
It was an event that doesn't happen a lot in Knox County as far as trials go and stuff, and so it was a long drawn-out trial. In the end, the jury came back with a verdict, and the verdict was that she was guilty of the homicide.
Judge sentences Francis to life imprisonment for first-degree murder, with an additional 10 years for her firearm charge, the sentences to run consecutively.
Ultimately, Francis even had the chance to right her wrong. When the first shot didn't kill Dean, she could have used her Red Cross training to slow the blood loss and save him. But instead, she doubled down and shot him 2 more times. This shows premeditation and a lack of remorse.
The community of Verdigris and surrounding Knox County is shocked by the trial and the outcome.
In this case, a person that moved to the community murdered a person born and raised in the community, and of course that rocks people too. You know, somebody you see every day, now they're dead, now they're murdered. The person that they were with a lot is accused of that murder, and in a small community, it's hard.
It's hard to understand this crime because the motive really isn't clear. What did Francis stand to gain? Here's someone, a straight-A student, pursuing her passion in environmental studies. Why did she throw it all away?